Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday. Hooray. We finally made it to Friday, November 4th, 2022. Time for another year. We should just switch over to another year. I'd say probably, in about a month and a half, we should be looking for a new year on the calendar. It'll be very exciting. We'll start all over again. And, but in a couple of days, I don't know. I was going to say in a couple of days, we'll know what kind of year that's going to be. But we really won't. In all likelihood, there will be lots of close races. The division of the houses of Congress may be very close, and partisan control of both houses might actually be, hang in the balance of some runoff elections and some contests that still need to be settled, and lawsuits and recounts and refusals to concede. And I think you already know that. And maybe today, we can go into just exactly how crazy and confusing this could actually get, just to make you feel like, maybe that you want to spend your weekend driving people to the polls. That is to say, in some cases, actually giving them a lift to the polls. But I mean, like beating the bushes and turning people out of their homes so that they go to the polls in a nice way. That'll make them want to vote, of course, for the good guys. And you know who they are. And something. Okay. But yes, all of this on the table for the next couple of days. Election day, as we still call it, comes up on Tuesday, so that by the time we are back on the air on Monday, time will already have been running out over the weekend. Most of the early voting wraps up this weekend as well here in Virginia. Saturday, the last day to do it. I'm not certain why they don't do it anymore on the last Sunday. I'm not certain what happens on that Sunday, but I imagine that maybe the election administrators are getting people together and want the polls closed so that everybody can get together for training. I don't know. Not sure what the excuse is there, although I remember that it was a big uproar because it used to be Souls to the Polls Day, but I think they do that earlier now. And, you could take your soul to the polls any day during the vast early voting period, I guess. So we'll see. Another, chaos news, I guess we could say. Lots of things happening. Bruce McFarland reminds us that, he says, so I guess we might have about a month or so to sort out what social medium to use to send out messages with our KITM hashtag. That may be true. It may be that, Elon Musk makes it so dangerous and toxic to be a part of Twitter at that point that we just can't stand it anymore. Or it may be that the whole thing collapses of its own weight and goes under. I don't know. I'm not really sure which one would do it. And I'm not certain. I just can't really nail down what sorts of events would cause me to fold up tent and move elsewhere, nor do I know where to go. There have been about 5 different suggested platforms. The one I've seen shared most recently and without the accompanying pushback saying that it's, that there are problems with it that they just can't overcome and they will not participate in this or that social medium is, I guess, Mastodon. There's Counter Social, which was tossed out there a couple of weeks ago, had some pushback. There were 1 or 2 others, some of which really struck people or, rubbed people the wrong way for whatever reason. And then Mastodon was the last entry into this category. And I haven't seen anybody, thoroughly debunk the idea of moving to Mastodon. But I think people are covering the bases, joining multiple platforms. I don't remember. There are some that I grabbed my usual Twitter hashtag, or not hashtag, but handle on. But I don't think I'm up to date on the latest entries. But I guess I'll go find out. Then I won't be sure whether I reserved that handle or somebody else grabbed it. But I don't know why anybody else would grab this one. It's not great, but I guess it's got some capital behind it. Anyway, we'll have to figure that out. And people can send along their suggestions if we haven't named it as to which platform might be best suited. And I don't know. We'll have to wait and see where people land. In other news, I did catch wind of this. We'll see what goes on. But it is Friday, and that means this evening, those of the Jewish faith who can actually make it there on time and have eaten their dinner on time and gathered up their kids might be heading to the synagogue for regular Erev Shabbat Friday evening services. But apparently up in New Jersey, that comes along with an FBI warning of a credible threat to synagogues in New Jersey. I don't think there's much information about what type of threat, but I guess we can all imagine what sorts of things. If history is any guide, maybe somebody has left a manifesto behind somewhere at an Olive Garden or something when they were gathering with the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys and has some sort of nefarious attack planned. I hope nothing comes of it, as always, but just want to let you know what sort of world we live in. Also, I guess you can hold that up against word yesterday that somebody has. I don't know if I put aside a story or retweeted or anything, but I happened to see it yesterday. I had the article open that somebody has firebombed a Dunkin' Donuts somewhere because I don't know what, they had a flyer up about it was related to, oh my God, they are not believers in the QAnon / Republican theory that drag queens are, pedophile vampires from another planet and a huge danger to everybody. So if you have a flyer up advertising a drag show, so even if it's going on somewhere else, it may have been going on at this place. And we're now at the stage of firebombing donut shops, which, strikes me as a little odd and a little bit self-defeating. I have a feeling that the firebomber was probably quite into donuts at some point and, just, I guess, despite themselves, has firebombed this location instead. But this increasing activity, Proud Boys turning out to protest any place that advertises having a drag event of any kind, and sort of matter-of-factly being reported in the news media that, they're protesting against it, / showing up and threatening to beat people up and or murder them. So, just a little escalation of things heading into the weekend. Be careful out there. There's lots happening. All right, let's see. Other things to share with you over the next 2 hours or so. Maybe I should start by going to some of the longer form things that I put aside along with my generalized worry that elections won't be settled for a long time. I think we've all come to understand that it will be the case with so many election deniers running for office and running on platforms of election denial and on platforms of outright willingness to perpetrate election fraud should general consensus deem that they or their favored candidates have in fact lost. They are running for offices that might otherwise entitle them to issue certificates of election for whomever they might have preferred to have won the seat. If you run for Secretary of State, or in some cases some states may call the position something else, or the position may be appointed by the governor, and the governor, in the person of people like Doug Mastriano, may have pledged to appoint people who will do their bidding rather than actually count the votes. You could find, one, that we are swamped in the new Congress, the 118th Congress, which is set to convene on January 3rd, 2023, unless January 3rd is a Sunday, and I guess we ought to pick up a calendar and take a look. The The NAFTA calendar, I think, only goes through December on the fridge, so we'll go to the handy-dandy iPhone here. Let's see. I'm just sort of curious. No, it's middle of the week. It's a Tuesday, just like Election Day. How fortuitous. We're going to have another Election Day all over again on January 3rd. Ordinarily, what happens, of course, is the clerks and secretaries of state and governors, etc., all around the country in the several states and the territories will certify the winners to the various congressional seats, House and Senate, along with all the other winners of other offices. But the ones I'm thinking about right now are the certificates would then be sent to Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, if you will, along with pictures of your mooning of the dance show in the high school gym, going back to the Grease days, but sent on to Washington. The clerk of the House and secretary of the Senate receive them, and this is the mechanism by which we are officially told who will be entitled to take seats and serve in the 118th Congress. From time to time, over the years, there have, of course, been legitimate contests. Sometimes not that legitimate, these contests. But they're rare overall, but they're not, in terms of the number of serious contests per number of seats contested. In a typical Congress, you'll have zero such challenges. But, every couple of years, there's one or two seats that there's reason to contest. And it's usually that the race was extraordinarily close, was decided by a handful or even a few hundred votes, perhaps, and recounts were contested, and the methods of counting are contested, and one party or another to the election will perhaps disagree with a judicial ruling on how to count ballots, and reason basically to say that it's possible that if people would just hear me out, the current Congress will see things differently than the judge did at home or the Secretary of State did at home, and see fit to seat me instead of that person. And I think I have a legitimate argument about it. That will happen in the ordinary course of things every once in a while when two perfectly sane, perfectly moderate sometimes candidates will contest an election and disagree with the official outcome, and they'll ask Congress to decide the case for them, because ultimately the Constitution leaves that question to each house. They'll determine the qualifications of their members. There are situations in which the courts will disallow that. I mean, of course, whenever I bring this up, people point to the Adam Clayton Powell case, during which the courts were rushed to say, no, you can't impose new requirements in order to be eligible to serve. The requirements for eligibility are outlined in the Constitution, and you cannot add to them, or I guess subtract from them. 25 years of age for the House, I think 7 years a naturalized citizen or a natural-born citizen. In the Senate, 30 years of age, similar residency and citizenship requirement, etc., etc. So you can't impose new requirements. In the Powell case, he was, at that stage, he was either under serious investigation or had perhaps in fact been convicted in a criminal investigation, and the House thought it perhaps reflected badly on the House's reputation and its credibility to include such a person among their number, and sought to exclude him. And you can do that, or they can say, we will expel you from our ranks, but that requires a 2/3 vote of the House to expel someone who has been otherwise rightfully seated. But to opt to not include somebody, or to refuse to swear them in and include them from the beginning as a member of the House, can be done by majority vote, which is a little bit different, and But the courts in the Powell case at least decided, well, you can't initially refuse to seat someone simply because you don't like them or because you've imposed some new requirement. You have to now be 25 years of age, 7 years a citizen, reside in your district, and not be a criminal. You can't just add that at the outset and say, no, by majority vote we'll exclude you. So it doesn't work that way. But there are other ways to exclude people at the beginning by majority vote. And that would include saying we don't believe that you were rightfully elected. Your certificate of election is in question, or we believe it was improperly issued. And now that we might land on this year. What if we get election denialist secretaries of state and election denialist congressional candidates who together say, I refuse to concede. I reject the notion that I got fewer votes. I believe the other side was cheating. I believe something, whatever other allegations they may make. And what if the Secretary of State, either newly elected or already incumbent in that state, says, I believe that story, and I will not be issuing a certificate of election for Jones, whom the newspapers say got more votes for Congress than Smith. I will instead be issuing that certificate of election for Smith because I believe they got more votes. Or who knows? Maybe they're wacky enough to say, I don't care how many votes they got. I'm not issuing a certificate of election for Jones because I believe he's a vampire pedophile, and I won't issue such a certificate for such a person. And even though he got the most votes, it doesn't matter. The certificate I'm sending says I'm the Secretary of State, and I am, and I'm certifying it for Smith, and I might not even give you any numbers. I'm just telling you that Smith was the winner. Or did I get that backwards again? I don't know. Anyway, you get the idea. What happens? Well, in the ordinary course of things, when there's only one or possibly two such contests going on, it's fairly straightforward. Everybody else gets their certificates counted, and you swear everybody in, and there's a whole process with that. In the House, of course, the whole thing, the entire body has been elected, and nobody is technically in office at the beginning of a new Congress in the House of Representatives. And so the clerk of the House will take on the duty of calling up the dean of the House, the longest serving member of the body, and they will swear in well, let's see, they'll be sworn in. I can't even remember the opening day procedure, but essentially there's a process by which the continuing work of the clerk of the House includes swearing somebody in who will then be in a position to swear in the rest of the body, and then the rest of the body having been sworn in, they can elect a speaker, and then the speaker is sworn in at that point, and then they go on about their business. And in this process of swearing in other members, there's an opportunity to contest the certificates of election and the propriety of swearing in one, occasionally two, of these members on the basis of these objections. And when it looks like that's going to be necessary, the candidates and the purported election winner are sometimes then asked to stand aside, as they say, from taking the oath of office until the election contest can be settled. Probably in the popular memory, maybe the most prominent recent example has been in the Al Franken case, or in the case of Roland Burris, appointed to the Senate by besmirched then Governor Ron Blagojevich. And, the allegations that he had somehow taken a bribe in order to appoint Roland Burris to the seat that had been vacated by one Barack Obama there in Illinois. So what happens? Like I said, in the ordinary course of things, there are 434 other members of the House who have been duly elected. Their certificates are fine. Everybody's sworn in. And the 434 have a procedure for what to do with that 435th person. and 436th, who's looking for space in that 435th seat. And they ordinarily will send the contest to the House Administration Committee, or in the Senate to the Senate Rules Committee, and charge them with, well, you deal with this off the floor. You figure this out, then make a recommendation to us, and we'll just hold this seat open. And it's a great disadvantage to the district or state, but that's the only way we can think of to do it. The contest will be settled by people who can dig into it and figure out what to do, make a recommendation to us. Then we vote, and generally speaking, whatever party is in, the outcome usually ends up whatever party is in the majority, they tend to, if it's an open question, favor their own party. That does happen. Occasionally, though, they go the other direction. When Democrats are in control in the modern context, they sometimes say, if the claim is flimsy or in other ways legitimately contested, just so we don't look like we're partisan actors, we'll sometimes either slow things down or perhaps not vote to put the Democrat in office. But only Democrats get embarrassed about that. Republicans generally don't. But it doesn't happen often enough for there to be a real track record for either party on that. And going even further back to as I've mentioned before, Indiana 8th District, the bloody 8th District, back in the 80s, early 80s, there was certainly the feeling among the Republican conference at the time that a credible contest that should have been decided or could easily legitimately have been decided in favor of the Republican candidate was instead strong-armed through and settled by the Democratic majority in favor of their Democratic colleague instead. So certainly people feel that way about these things, and you could do a little bit of reading. I don't know whether the Wikipedia entry on the 8th District and the bloody 8th will thoroughly explain the situation or not, but perhaps we could spend some time on it, and maybe we should. But anyway, instead I put aside in Pocket some of the descriptions of what you do with contested elections and unfilled seats in the beginning of the new Congress. I started with the Wikipedia entry. Interestingly enough, there is an actual entry for unseated members of the United States Congress, just to sort of explain the background of where to go. And then, of course, there's another, it leads us to some other reading. So I thought we would perhaps begin here. Both houses of the United States Congress, it says at the outset, have refused to seat new members based on Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution, which states that each house shall be the judge of the elections, returns, and qualifications of its own members, and a majority of each shall constitute a quorum to do business, but a smaller number may adjourn from day to day and be authorized to compel the attendance of absent members in such manner and under such penalties as each house may provide. The whole second half of that is sort of extraneous to what's going on. Each house shall be the judge of elections, yes, returns and qualifications of its own members, and a majority shall constitute a quorum to do business, and likewise a majority shall make that decision. If you want to ask the House, is this person's election valid? It's a majority question. This has been interpreted that members of the House of Representatives and the Senate could refuse to recognize the election or appointment of a new representative or senator for any reason, often political heterodoxy or criminal record will do the trick. However, the U.S. Supreme Court in Powell versus McCormick from 1969 limited the powers of the Congress to refuse to seat an elected member to when the individual does not meet the specific constitutional requirements of age, citizenship, or residency. I am not entirely positive that it would be interpreted the same way, both situationally, gimmitarianly, I guess, if we can make up yet another word about it, and just plain power politics of the Supreme Court and of Congress. I'm not entirely certain it plays out the same way. I don't think that, depending on who's challenging what, if Republicans were able to muster a majority somehow and a vote in the House saying that they simply don't accept the certificate of election as valid for, say, the Democrat who presented themselves for the seat. I don't know that the Supreme Court would say, well, Powell versus McCormick speaks to this. It's not that they are adding an additional constitutional requirement. It is that they are saying that the constitutional requirements that exist, well, not the constitutional requirements, but the procedural requirements, that a valid certificate of election be presented, they're contesting that that has been done. They could be lying through their teeth, but that's what they're saying. So anyway, the Powell versus McCormick case at the time, Chief Justice Earl Warren ruling that the court will hold that since Adam Clayton Powell Jr. was duly elected by the voters of the 18th Congressional District of New York and was not ineligible to serve under any provision of the Constitution, the House is without power to exclude him from its membership. The House, of course, could be arguing at this point he was not duly elected by the constituents of that district, and that's why we're rejecting him. Had we acknowledged that his election was valid and sought to exclude him for some other reason, we'd be in Powell territory, but we're not even going to get there. The Federal Contested Elections Act of 1969, curiously enough, passed right then and there, currently lays out the procedures by which each house determines contested elections. And wouldn't you like to know what that has to say about the subject? Well, as it happens, that too has a Wikipedia entry, but we'll take a 2-minute break to gather ourselves up in our shock here before we come back and take a look through that. But there is also, in case you're interested, a history of unseated members of Congress going back to 1869 and the post-Civil War South, straight up to 2009. What do you know?
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. By the way, scrolling by in my feed was the link I needed to go back to figure out where was the donut shop that was firebombed over a drag show. And probably the biggest issue I need to address is that it wasn't a Dunkin' Donuts. I'm sure they would be very upset to find out that I was referring to them as Dunkin' Donuts. They are apparently an independent donut shop. The Donut Hole in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that urban hellhole, that urban crime-ridden, unbelievable red run state and red run city, decaying from the inside out due to the rampant crime and murder rates that you hear so much about when Republicans complain about crime, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, here is one of those cities being burned to the ground by extremist protester activity. But gosh, you don't hear about that one very much from the people who are making crime an issue. Anyway, here it is. Oklahoma donut shop hit with Molotov cocktail after hosting drag queen art show, according to HuffPost. Video shows an extremist. Now, it shows a person firebombing the donut hole. It's true. But isn't it conclusory to say that this person is an extremist? We don't know that. All we can tell from the video is that they are firebombing a donut shop. And there could be very good moderate reasons for firebombing a donut shop, don't you think? I think this is really jumping to conclusions. Sebastian Murdoch. I guess all Murdochs are just crazy when it comes to journalism. Of course, this is not a member of the Rupert Murdoch family, and I spell their last name different, and I see what they're doing. And I think basically I think in our circles, fair to say that firebombing a donut shop is a pretty extreme act, even if they got your order wrong. So maybe Sebastian's right here. And maybe he didn't write the subheader. Video shows an extremist in a red hat. What kind of extremist? One of those kinds. In a red hat. You can't tell what his hat says here, but you can tell that the bottle that he has in his hands has a flaming rag in the top. So, he might have one that says, maybe his red hat says both sides. I don't know. Video shows an extremist in a red hat throwing a firebomb into the donut shop and leaving a note that reportedly contained hateful rhetoric, and I guess leaving it somewhere that wasn't on fire, too. So, I guess good planning there. A donut shop in Tulsa, Oklahoma, crime pit of despair, was firebombed by an extremist early Monday after the business hosted an art show that featured drag queens. To what extent, I do not know. Doesn't really matter. The donut hole had its front door shattered and suffered minor fire damage after an unidentified person wearing a mask, first time you could get that guy to wear a mask, I'm sure, black clothing and a red hat, was seen on video throwing a Molotov cocktail into the business around 2:30 a.m. Monday. And I'm sure that proud boy was very proud of himself wearing a mask and doing it at 2:30. It's the second time the donut shop has been vandalized, if you can count that as vandalism. I think it's a little more than that. In less than a month after the business hosted an art installation event run by drag queens. Investigators said the individual smashed the door, and then there were some pop-up ads, and we couldn't read any more of the story. The end. All right. Where we are? Let's see. We got to look this again. Investigators said the individual smashed the door with a baseball bat. Aha! I knew that those things were dangerous after all, even though people say about gun incidents, well, it could have been a baseball bat. See? It was a baseball bat, and look what happened. Smashed the front door with the baseball bat before lighting the firebomb and throwing it inside. It's got a chemical of some kind in it that is meant to spread fire quickly and cause a great potential damage, Tulsa Fire Department Lieutenant Tim Ingram told News on 6. They could probably tell you what chemical it was, too. But I'm not sure that it matters. While the fire damage was minor, video showed the perpetrator leaving a note on a neighboring business, which authorities said contained Bible verses, that justifies it, and hateful rhetoric, according to Tulsa World. Tulsa Fire Department spokesman Andy Little did not reveal the full details of the note to the outlet. And that seems kind of interesting, too, by the way, just pinning a note on the neighboring business. By the way, I might accidentally burn down your business, which is all good with me. The problem is you're next to a place that once had art that was put up by a person who's also maybe a drag queen, and maybe it's directly involved in it. Maybe, I don't know. It still doesn't really describe exactly what's going on, but you shouldn't be firebombing people regardless. It's the second time the store's been vandalized after hosting the art show. On October 15th, the store's front doors were smashed after hosting its first drag queen event. The Donut Hole's Facebook post says that last night they had the privilege of being able to be a part of the vision of the Queen's Dirty Dozen, an art installation donut shop. What? That's what it says. An art installation donut shop ran by drag queens. So not the best writing in the world. The event was an enormous success with over 500 guests attending, and an overwhelming reaction of laughing, jokes, fun, and good times were had by all. Unfortunately, there was also a reaction of hate, and we were the victim of somebody's, not apostrophe S, but S-O-M-E-B-O-D-I-E-S, that's wrong, somebody's malicious acts. But in one's attempt to rain on our parade, the community answered by showing overwhelming support. I mean, rain would have been welcome. on that particular parade because the parade was on fire. A GoFundMe was set up to raise money to repair the damage before the shop was once again vandalized. The Donut Hole posted a video of the unidentified person vandalizing the shop on its Facebook page. All right. So, going on to point out here, as they do for context, of course, you already know this, but right-wing hate mongers have been targeting LGBTQ events across the country as the GOP and right-wing personalities ramp up dangerous rhetoric vilifying LGBTQ people. Fox News host Tucker Carlson, for instance, falsely equated taking a child to a drag show with child molestation. And just last month, more than 30 House Republicans introduced a bill that would restrict LGBTQ-related educational materials and programs in schools. The Donut Hole initially asked for $2,500 to repair their damage from the first act of vandalism and has already received more than $10,000 on its GoFundMe page. So I guess they're well on their way to recovery, but who knows how many more times they'll be vandalized. Anyway, just thought I'd let you know about that. And again, in the coastal elitist crime-ridden blue city of Tulsa, Oklahoma is where that's happening. Now, back to the other nightmare we were reading about before, unseated members of the United States Congress and how you deal with them or how you make them unseated members in the modern context. But just so you know, the modern history of this practice includes these three entries in Wikipedia. Adam Clayton Powell Jr., which you heard about, or who you heard about because of the court case that he brought and prevailed in. He was then a sitting representative, Democrat from New York, excluded by the House of Representatives in 1967 because of allegations of corruption. He successfully sued to retain his seat in a landmark Supreme Court decision, Powell v. McCormick. And Louis C. Wyman, Republican of New Hampshire, declared the victor of the U.S. Senate contest in 1974 in New Hampshire by a narrow margin on Election Day. That margin, 355 votes. A first recount gave the election instead to John A. Durkin, the Democratic candidate there in New Hampshire, by 10 votes. But a second recount, which just really indicates the danger of all of these things and the amount of error and change that can go on. In the second recount, it swung the result back to Wyman by 2 votes. Can you imagine? This is really, would have people tearing their hair out now, or killing one another, or firebombing donut shops. The state of New Hampshire has to make up its mind. What do? They certified Wyman as the winner by 2 votes. But Durkin appealed to the Senate, as you can imagine, because, damn, 2 votes. And I mean, it was a 355, then it went the other way entirely by 10 votes, and it went the other way again by 2 votes. You can see that they're, it's without contesting that something illegal had happened, you could still say, well, the vote count is very close. A third count, even without changing the rules, might yield something completely different. You never know. And more likely, though, would have been a fight over the inclusion of individual ballots. This ballot is marked funny, but they said they could tell the voter's intent, but I say you can't. And they want somebody to look at this. And guess what? The ultimate arbiter is the Senate itself. So Durkin appealed to the Senate, which had a 60-vote Democratic majority. So what happens? The Senate refused to seat Wyman while considering the matter anyway. So while they were working on it, they said, you can't sit. Now, that wasn't the case later on, you'll see, with a different senator involved. But after a long and contentious debate in the Senate, with Republicans filibustering attempts by the Democratic majority to seat Durkin instead, and that's, I don't know, maybe that's fair game at that point, right? A special election was held instead, so that's an interesting way of settling it. You just filibuster the question until a special election can be held. And Durkin, guess what? He won handily and became a senator. So that's a really great one because that seesaws back and forth a couple of times. Obviously a fairly close election. 355 votes initially separate the candidates. It looks like, let's see, Wyman, the Republican, wins by 355. We want a recount. Recount says, you know what? Durkin, the Democrat, wins by 10. Wyman says, I want another recount. You know what? Wyman did win, but by 2 votes. And we got to do something here. So we'll certify, New Hampshire certifies Wyman as the winner. Durkin takes it to the Senate. The Senate majority says, you know what? We're going to seat, not only are we not going to seat Wyman while we're deciding, but at the end of the debate, we are going to move to seat Durkin, who the state of New Hampshire says didn't win. He lost by 2 votes. But we just think there's something about it, and you'd have to read the minutes of that debate to figure out what it is. There's something about it that says we think Durkin needs to be seated. And this is, this is exactly the sort of thing that you probably wouldn't find Democrats necessarily doing now. Well, we have a 60-seat majority, and we feel like the Democrat won. I don't know why. We're just going to do it, The Republicans outraged, filibuster the thing. They hold a special election. And then interestingly enough, the people of New Hampshire say, all right, if you're going to kick it back to us, here's our answer. Very clearly, very loudly, overwhelmingly, Durkin. We want Durkin. So the Senate didn't have to settle it. Now, in 2009, Roland Burris, due to the Rod Blagojevich corruption charges, was initially refused his seat in the Senate in 2009. On December 30th, 2008, Governor Blagojevich announced that he was naming Burris to the seat, and Illinois Secretary of State Jesse White registered the appointment in the official records of Illinois on December 31st, 2008. However, Secretary of State White declined to sign the Senate's certification form. How interesting is that? Let me see if we can read that again. Blagojevich announces that he's naming Burris. Illinois Secretary of State White registers the appointment in the official records of Illinois, but Secretary of State White then declines to sign the Senate's certification form. The Senate has its own form. Sign this and we'll let your guy into the Senate, and he wouldn't do it. So because of this, on January 5th, 2009, Secretary of the Senate Nancy Erickson rejected Burris's certificate of appointment to the Senate as invalid, citing Senate Rule 2 as the reason for the rejection. Burris appeared in Washington at the January congressional swearing-in ceremony on January 6th to claim his seat, but was denied entry into the Senate chambers. The actual, the Sergeant at Arms said, nope, can't come in. You're not a member of the Senate. Following an Illinois Supreme Court ruling on January 9th, 2009, White, the Secretary of State, provided Burris with a certified copy of the appointment's registration, and Burris delivered that copy bearing the state seal to the Secretary of the Senate. On January 12, 2009, after the Secretary of the Senate announced that she and the Senate parliamentarian, Alan Fruman, deemed Burris's new credentials valid, Senate leaders decided to seat Burris. Burris was sworn in by the President of the Senate, Dick Cheney, you remember that guy, on January 15th, 2009. So just letting you know that these things kind of do happen from time to time. And with the record number, just the existence of so many election denialists, and I assume it's a record number of election denialists running for office, particularly those running for office on the platform of an election denialism, both denial of the outcome of the 2020 election and the stated intention to deny, if necessary, the outcome of the 2022 elections as well. Don't you think we're in for some number of challenges being posed? And don't you think we're in for some number of certifications perhaps being either issued or withheld for invalid and partisan reasons by weirdo secretaries of state and other elections officials? I think it's a real possibility. So, as that summary in Wikipedia mentioned, the Federal Contested Elections Act is the governing legislation, the governing statute on this subject. The Federal Contested Elections Act of 1969 provides a procedure for candidates to the United States House of Representatives to contest general elections by filing with the clerk of the House. Presumably, it has a parallel in the Senate, but I don't know. For some reason, it isn't mentioned here. The law delegates all matters involving contested elections first to the Committee on House Administration, which receives jurisdiction of such matters by the rules of the House, and I'm sure that they are still in place. The constitutional basis for the act, Article 1, Section 5, which, of course, as you're reminded, says that each house shall be the judge of the elections, returns, and qualifications of its own members. As a result, the House or Senate have final authority to decide a contested election, superseding even a state legislature. Ooh, remember the independent state legislatures? Apparently the ultimate authority somehow in federal elections, but as it turns out, and this is an interesting contest that it sets up. What are we saying here? Ultimately, remember that the theory will go that, the state legislatures are the ultimate authorities in certifying these elections, both presidential electors and members of the Electoral College in presidential races, but also presumably in the outcome of these congressional races. But on the other hand, then there will be people who say, yes, but the Federal Contested Elections Act says that the House and Senate have final authority to decide a contested election, even superseding a state legislature or court, by the way, to which Republicans, if they need to, will no doubt reply, yes, but our theory of the independent state legislature is based in the Constitution, which can't be superseded by mere statute, even a statute that says that a state legislature's power in these matters is superseded by the power of the House and or Senate, to which I hope Democrats would say, well, yes, but the statute in this case, the Federal Contested Elections Act, is merely restating the constitutional provision of Article 1, Section 5 that says quite explicitly that each house shall be the judge of its elections, returns, qualifications of its own members. The fact that we restated that in statute doesn't mean that it's taken down a peg and isn't as constitutional or more so than your fake independent state legislature theory. After all, the independent state legislature theory is a matter of interpretation of the language, and I think an improper one at that, but interpretation of the language of the Constitution. Whereas the plain language on its face in Article 1, Section 5 says very clearly who the ultimate authority for membership in the House and Senate really is. So it's going to be, some kind of contest here, trying to figure out who to listen to, except this court is likely to say, we think that the theory that we like is more important than the words that the founders wrote. We're originalists, but we understand the original intent of the Constitution better than the people who wrote it. So, and besides which, we're alive and they're dead, and what are you going to do about it? You used to ask how many divisions the Supreme Court had. You never really actually asked that question, but we're mixing all of our metaphors. And the court can just as well ask how many divisions the dead founders have. And we don't know the answer to that, by the way. I've seen The Lord of the Rings. People can come back from the dead and fight. And it's like the snap of the fingers. It's easy. Anyway, so as a result, House and Senate have allegedly the final authority to decide a contested election, superseding even a state legislature or court. Court cases have held that House decisions of contested elections cannot be brought to the courts on appeal, not even the United States Supreme Court. How do you like that? Now, again, this is court cases that have held that. So that's reversible if you need to in a Gimmitarian type situation. You'd have 6 potential votes to draw from on the Supreme Court to say, yeah, courts have said you can't appeal this to the Supreme Court, but we say different now. But there's the state of the law now. These are political questions. It's the political question doctrine that prevents the courts from taking up a challenge to a decision by one or the other of the bodies of the Congress to exclude if they refuse to accept as valid the certificates of election of an incoming member. Where do you go with that? Up to this point, the courts have said we can't intervene in this. In the Supreme Court case in 1969, Powell versus McCormick, a precedent was set, though, with regard to the meaning of qualifications, resulting in finding that Representative Powell had been wrongfully excluded from his seat. Now, the question is, what power have the courts got to declare that the exclusion is wrongful? And in what cases will they do so? What about initiating examination of a contested election? That's the next section here. The law explains the process. The filing of a notice of contest by the loser of the election, the taking of testimony from witnesses, and the holding of hearings on the depositions and papers filed with the clerk of the House. The burden of proof lies on the challenger to produce sufficient evidence to change the outcome of the election. Now, mind you, you read that and on its face you say, okay, well, good. So you can't just show up with frivolous charges and say, reverse the election for me, the Republican. But remember also, all it's saying is the burden of proof lies with the challenger, fine, to produce sufficient evidence to change the outcome of the election. Now, who decides whether or not it's sufficient? And the answer is whoever happens to be sitting on the House Administration Committee in the first instance when they consider the case. And then ultimately, whatever the House of Representatives, however constituted at the moment, believes to be sufficient. I have no doubt that it's entirely within the realm of possibility that someone could present something that right-minded people, and I mean that in every sense of the word, that correct thinkers and sane people who actually follow the rule of law and understand, rules of evidence, etc., would say, they just haven't met that burden here. They're saying that the certificate of election issued to the Democrat in this case is invalid because the person is a vampire pedophile. And the rest of us say, yeah, you haven't really met your burden of proof there. For instance, can you prove any vampiric activity whatsoever? And the Republicans' answer is yes, they're a Democrat. To which normally we say that's not really going to do it. But before a jury of Republicans, the majority being Republicans, what if they vote to accept that and there's no appealing to courts about their ruling? What do you do with that? That's problematic. So, like I said, the challenger has to produce sufficient evidence to change the outcome of the election. An examination of a contested election may also be initiated by any member on the floor who wishes to challenge the legitimacy of another member's taking the oath of office. You should have been doing that all along, by the way, with Murdery Trader Green and maybe Lauren Boebert and a few others as well. But now you didn't, and instead you'll be in a position to find out what happens when Murdery Trader Green reads this and says, I will object to the credentials being presented by 1, 2, 5, 200, whatever the number may be, of Democrats entering this chamber. You're all pedophile vampires. By rights, I shouldn't be allowing any of you here. And the real question is, this whole scenario hinges on who even shows up and how many seats does the normal process of elections tell us the Republicans should, by rights, whatever that means, occupy. In other words, as I posed it on Twitter the other day, what if 201 Republicans show up on January 3rd with what the newspapers and television networks and general circulation news sources and otherwise right-thinking people believe to be valid certificates of election? 201. Not enough to hold a majority ordinarily in the House of Representatives. You would need 218 to hold a majority. But 201 of them show up, and everybody, normal people without making up reasons say, yeah, these guys have definitely won their seats. They seem to have had more votes and very little question about whether or not that's true. And 199, just to keep the numbers even, so 201 plus 199, 400 total members of the House. 199 Democrats show up, and nobody's complaining at the moment about their credentials either. But That leaves 35 seats outstanding. And what if, just for the sake of this hypothetical, 35 Democrats have been declared more or less the winner of their elections by the usual sources, and it's cited in all the newspapers and all the networks are calling it, and even the secretaries of state of those states certify 35 additional Democrats as winners. So, without any contests going on, if the certificates sent by the proper authorities in all 50 states and territories, etc., District of Columbia, yes, but they only get a delegate, not a member of the House. So 435 certifications are received, and it ought to be 234 Democrats in the House and 201 Republicans, a narrow majority for the Democrats. But 35 of the seats that should be going to Democrats are being contested. At the moment, the only seats that aren't being contested are the 201 Republican seats and the 199 Democratic seats. What do we do? Are they sworn in with a Republican majority, and the House Administration Committee needs to be convened to examine the 35 challenges? And that's an awful lot. I mean, if you want to, just because the math is a little more complicated and didn't want to do it in my head on the fly, you could make it so that there's only a 1 or 2 seat majority for the Republicans and only 1 or 2 seats at stake as well. That could change the outcome. The 218th Democrat could win the challenge, but in the meantime, it's being debated by a House that is, for practical purposes, majority Republican, even though they could lose that majority if the Democrats are awarded the seats to which they were entitled. But a majority Republican House would probably constitute also a majority Republican House Administration Committee to look at the case, and they would make a Republican-leaning, presumably, finding for the still, for whatever reason, Republican majority in the House, and see if you can guess which way they would vote to solidify their majority and take it away from the Democrats. Can they do that? Yes, they absolutely can. Would courts step in? No, they probably wouldn't. Not this court anyway, and they usually shouldn't anyway. All right, welcome back now to the Nightmare Scenario here on the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio. So where were we? We were just reading to you and then extrapolating from the reading here that, an examination of a contested election may also be initiated by any member on the floor. So for that matter, I mean, you'll recall that, I don't know whether she's still doing it all the time, but for some period of time, particularly during the COVID restrictions where you're supposed to wear a mask, et cetera, Murdery Trader Green used to regularly, because she had all this time on her hands, she's been excluded from serving on committees by the Democratic majority. What if in a scenario like this, there's a Republican working majority on the floor on January 3rd before they settle these elections cases, and she's not had her credentials contested, so she's available to contest the credentials of, well, anybody she wants, really, whether it's 1 or 2 seats, or the bare minimum number of seats that would give or lock in a working majority for Republicans going forward, or for that matter, the credentials of every Democrat who purports to have been elected to the House of Representatives, because why not? Like, really, it's no skin off her nose. She's got no plans. And is she really disrupting any Republican plans? All they plan to do is investigate Hunter Biden 24/7 anyway. So do they really care about their legislative agenda being held up by this sort of nonsense on day 1 through day 50 through whenever it takes? Why not challenge the credentials of every single Democrat that has arrived in Congress? I mean, some of it's frivolous, but there's no punishment for that, and it wastes time, so why not do it? And it gives everybody the chance to dig up whatever dirt they want on every Democrat. Like, why not spend, if you're Murdery Trader Green, why not spend Congress's time on all of that? I mean, she hasn't done that so far, but I don't know. Now, maybe she's learning about it here, listening to the show. I don't know. So just keep in mind that can be done. If you're really a maximalist, then there's really no reason why they wouldn't do that. And if you're really a QAnon believer, then there's really no reason in your head why you shouldn't do it. Because why should you allow vampire pedophiles into the chamber, right? So maybe they'll do it. So where were we? Right. So any member can raise it. That's troublesome. The challenge begins in the form of a resolution, just by way of procedural note. It is then referred to the Committee on House Administration for review. Individual electors from the state in question may also petition the House for a review of the election, just so that you know, all you crazies listening to the show, crazy Republicans in the 50 states, you too can petition the House for a review of the election. And if you are petitioning a House that is majority MAGA lunatic Republican, at least for the time being, while these contests are being filed, maybe they'll take up your petition and act on it. Well, what happens next? From committee to House, it says. After the committee completes its examination of the election, it issues a report to the full House in the form of a resolution with recommendations. The House then adopts or rejects this resolution by majority vote. The precedents of the House state that the resolution can, 1, these are the options they have: dismiss the challenge. They can declare which candidate is entitled to the seat. They can assert that no one should be seated pending the completion of an investigation. They can call for a new election to be held. They can refute the challenger as not qualified to contest the election. They can provide reimbursement for the contestants from the contingency fund of the House for costs incurred in the contested election process. So, among their options are simply saying, if the Democrat was initially declared the loser by the Secretary of State, even if it was done in the Democrats' view improperly, and that Democrat then challenges the outcome, the House Administration Committee can recommend that the full House simply dismiss the complaint by saying that the Democratic candidate was never qualified to file the challenge in the first place, and so therefore we don't even have to reach the merits of their complaint. In addition to which, we can award federal funds as part of the House contingency fund. We can use federal money to reimburse the Republican for the trouble of having asked us to dismiss the Democrats' challenge outright. How much did that cost you? $1 million. All right, fine. You can do it that way. Will they do it? How crazy are they? Do they know about this? Am I revealing it to them? I don't know. I don't know how much they know. Recounts are undertaken if the election loser can show, he is the pronoun they've chosen for the writing of this, if the loser can show that he has exhausted all appeals in the state courts under state law. However, the House has sometimes declined to order a recount if the state Supreme Court has already conducted one. So it can get kind of crazy out there. The House can say, we're going to do another recount. The Republican lost the 15th and final recount. But if the state court hasn't ordered one along the way, the House of Representatives apparently reserves the right to do that as well. The resolution containing the committee's recommendations is debated in the House. Amending it is possible, but difficult. It's just sort of discussing that as a conclusion there. I don't know much about that at the moment. Offhand, maybe if we read the actual bill itself, we'll see what makes it so difficult. The resolution is subject to a motion to recommit, sending it back to committee with instructions from the House to take further action, and we know about how much trouble they can cause. Adoption or defeat by a majority vote is by a majority vote of those present. So, again, if you've managed to muster 201 Republicans whom the clerk agrees are entitled to cast votes in this case, and only 199 Democrats whom the clerk agrees are entitled to cast votes in this case, you have a problem. Now, I guess the backstop against this at the moment, situationally speaking, is that the House is currently in Democratic hands, and the clerk, therefore, is a Democratic appointee, and they might feel like they are in some position to push back on the number of certificates that will and won't be accepted at any given time when people present their credentials. But what if they do it straight up and say, no one's contesting these 201 Republicans and no one's contesting these 199 Democrats. The only things being contested at the last minute were these 35 Democrats. And if you wanted to change the outcome, and maybe the clerk says, I'll reopen the floor for any contest, and then somebody smart says, all right, well, I'm a Democrat, and I haven't had my credentials to this point questioned. I will use it to question the credentials of 2 Republicans, bringing them down to 199, or 3 Republicans, I guess, bringing them down to 198. To our 199, at which point, of course, Republicans will say, well, fine, then I question the credentials of all 199 remaining Democrats. At which point, I guess, what if the clerk of the House at that point says, sorry, you're not recognized for that purpose at this point. I've recognized a Democrat to contest 3 more Republican seats. That leaves us at 199 Democrats and 198 Republicans. And therefore, the Democrats will continue in the majority, and they'll handle things from there. But that's just raw power, and the shoe could easily be on the other foot that way. Now, it will be very difficult to see a Democratic appointed clerk of the House say, I'll do this in favor of Republicans, or for a Republican clerk later on in some future Congress to do it in the favor of Democrats. So, I don't know what to say about that. Like, do we feel relief that the clerk of the House could backstop that now? And do we feel relief only because it's our belief that Republicans really might try to do this without genuine cause and without basis, and a Democrat would stop them? Or what? Because certainly the Republicans will believe the exact opposite about this thing, and there'll be no convincing them of the reality. It's scary, but it's never happened before because it just seems like the sort of thing that's just not done. But then again, there was never this many QAnons or election denialists or people who believed that they could get away with this stuff in front of everybody, willing to say this stuff. Now times have changed, to say it as gently as possible. So, where were we? Right. The resolution containing the committee's recommendations is debated in the House. Amending is possible. Adoption or defeat by a majority of those present. Prior to the Dornan versus Sanchez contest in 1996, or of the 1996 election, Bob Dornan and was it Loretta Sanchez, or I don't remember. There were 2 Sanchez's. You remember. That was the last, I think, House contest considered. But prior to Dornan versus Sanchez in 1996-97, the House last considered a contested election in 1985. There's the Indiana 8th District. McIntyre versus McCloskey in Indiana's 8th Congressional District. While the state of Indiana certified the Republican McIntyre as the winner of the election, the House ultimately voted to seat the Democratic challenger Frank McCloskey. A House-ordered recount gave McCloskey a 4-vote margin of victory. This, as you can well imagine, really riled the Newt Gingrich Republicans, and this was a rallying cry for years, and backed their belief that Democrats were hopelessly corrupt, and that anything that could be done to undermine them should be done to undermine them, and power ought to be grabbed on behalf of Republicans at all costs. And it took them 10 years to do it, but they did it. And they've never gone back. So, What about the section here, standards of adjudication? Just so you know, the statute says little about the substantive standards for judging a notice of contest. Under the law, the candidate contesting the election must file a notice of contest within 30 days of state certification of the election results. Hopefully, many of them will forget and do it on the 31st day, and somebody will throw it all out. But then the Supreme Court might say, what's 30? Isn't it pretty much the same as 31? Let's allow it. The only substantive requirements for the notice are that the contestant must, quote, state grounds sufficient to change the result of the election and must claim the right to the contestee's seat in Congress. What do they mean by that? Well, it might mean as simple as grounds sufficient to change the result. If you're behind by 5 votes, you must have a claim that could change at least 6. Let's say, so that you would then be the winner. So if you had, for whatever reason, if you contested only the results in 4 ballots and you lost by 6 votes, then they would say, we can't help you. There's nothing we can do here. But also, what do? You just contest all of them, or you contest a higher number. It's not hard to overcome that. Where were we with this? Right. The contestee then has 30 days to either file an answer or move for dismissal. So it takes 60 days until everybody's even had their say. The burden of proof rests with the contestant who, quote, must overcome the presumption of the regularity of an election and its results evidenced by the certificate of election presented by the contestee. That's another jumping off point to remind you that even here, the presumption of correctness is given to a certification from the Secretary of State. It's just on its face presumed to be the correct one. And the burden of proof for overturning that is on whoever's contesting the election. However, what if you're talking about a Secretary of State who has either just won election or won the last election or since winning election has pledged, I will only certify that Republicans win. I do not believe in the ability of Democrats to win elections. I will go out of my way to certify a Republican as the winner no matter what the outcome in the vote count. If a certificate shows up that bears an actual Secretary of State's signature saying that the Republican won, then the burden is on the Democrat, who everyone else in the state has said won thousands more votes than the person certified by the Secretary of State. Yet the burden of proof still rests with the person who won far more votes in this hypothetical. Well, that doesn't change. The burden of proof rests with the contestant who must overcome the presumption of the regularity of an election and its results evidenced by the certificate of election presented by the contestee. The law also sets forth procedures for an adversarial system of taking depositions and other discovery, so it's like a court case. Traditionally, the Committee on House Administration appoints a bipartisan 3-member task force to investigate and report on proceedings under the law. A bipartisan 3-member task force will, of course, have 2 members of the majority on it and 1 member of the minority, and guess what will happen? Generally, the task force investigates the contest and makes a recommendation to the Committee on House Administration, which then issues a report and sends a resolution, its recommendation, to the full House regarding the disposition of the contest. The committee may recommend and the House may approve by simple majority vote a decision affirming the right of the contestee to the seat, may seat the contestant, or find that neither party is entitled to be finally seated and declare a vacancy. It's pretty wild. Any number of outcomes, so no predicting it. One other item I have for examination, and hell, we might as well dive into that too, a CRS report on the subject. This one entitled Procedures for Contested Election Cases in the House of Representatives. This version last updated on October 18th, 2016. And probably hasn't been updated since because there haven't been any contested elections of this sort since then. We begin this lengthy read, perhaps we'll read the summary and then maybe selected bits of this 21-page document. Under the U.S. Constitution, each House of Congress has the express authority to be the judge of the elections and returns of its own members. That's, you remember, Article 1, Section 5, Clause 1 specifically, by the way. Although initial challenges and recounts for House elections are conducted at the state level under the state's authority to administer federal elections, Article 1, Section 4, continuing contests may be presented in the House, to the House, which may make a conclusive determination of a claim to the seat. In modern practice, the primary way for an election challenge to be heard by the House is a candidate-initiated contest under the Federal Contested Elections Act, codified at U.S. Code, 2 U.S. Code Section 381. Under the Federal Contested Elections Act, FCEA, the candidate challenging an election, that's the contestant, must file a notice of intention to contest within 30 days of state certification of the election results, stating with particularity the grounds for contesting the election. The contestee then has 30 days after service of the notice to answer, admitting or denying the allegations and setting forth any affirmative defenses. Before answering a notice, the contestee may make a motion to the Committee on House Administration for a more definitive statement, pointing out the defects and details desired if they think the first complaint is insufficient. And guess what might happen for a Democrat saying as a contestee, no, I demand more details from this Republican. But 2-1, the Republicans vote, well, we don't agree with you. This complaint will stand. Oh yes, right. So we've just done this one. If the motion is granted, the request for more definitive statement, etc., the contestant would then have 10 days to comply. Under FCEA, the burden of proof is on the contestant, the person who is presumably starting as the loser and who says this should be decided by the House. This person must overcome the presumption of the regularity of an election and its results evidenced by the certificate of election presented by the contestee. The FCEA's contested election procedure is directed at the question of who won the most votes and is therefore, quote, duly elected. It is not the proper vehicle to challenge the qualifications or eligibility of a member-elect. Indeed, the election contest brought under the FCEA challenging a member-elect's qualifications, not 25 years of age, etc., or not a resident of the district, or not a U.S. citizen, that would likely be subject to a motion to dismiss based on the failure of the contestant to state grounds sufficient to change the result of an election, or a failure of contestant to claim a right to contestee's seat. I guess with more particularity, more accurately, it would be to say if you were adding additional requirements, this person is a convicted felon and so therefore ought not to be seated. No, this isn't the stage for doing that. You would have to seat the person and then expel them if you felt like they didn't belong in there, not refuse to seat them in the first place. This is about whether or not they got enough votes, and only that. Or at least whether the votes have been counted correctly. In the FCEA's adversarial proceeding, either party may take sworn depositions, seek subpoenas for the attendance of witnesses and production of documents, and file briefs to include any material they wish to put on the record. The FCEA specifies that the actual election contest case, and that is enclosed in scare quotes, the case is heard by the committee on the papers, depositions, and exhibits filed by the parties, which shall constitute the record of the case. On less frequent occasions, the House may refer the question of the right to a House seat to the committee for it to investigate and report to the full House for disposition. In lieu of a record created by opposing parties, the committee may conduct its own investigation, take depositions, and issue subpoenas for witnesses and documents. Jurisdiction may be obtained in this manner from a challenge to the taking of the oath of office by a member-elect when the question of the final right to the seat is referred to the committee. In the past, committees investigating such questions have employed several investigative procedures, including impounding election records and ballots. Remember, they wanted to seize all the voting machines after the 2020 election. You could find yourself seizing voting machines using the authority of a working majority of the House of Representatives. And if they're QAnon nuts, maybe they'll do that. Maybe they'll finally get this seizure of voting machines that they were after in 2020, after all. In the past, committees investigating, included various investigative procedures, including impounding of election records and ballots, conducting a recount themselves, performing a physical examination of disputed ballots and registration documents, and interviewing and examining various election personnel in the state and the locality. Under either procedure, the committee will generally issue a report and file a resolution concerning the disposition of the case to be approved by the full House. Specifically, the committee may recommend, and the House may approve by a simple majority vote, to affirm the right of the contestee to the seat, to seat the contestant, or to find that neither is entitled to be seated and declare a vacancy. That's pretty wild. So, maybe we look at what begins on page 4 here. Challenges under the Federal Contested Elections Act. They discuss standing to initiate a contest under FCEA, filing of notice, swearing in of the member-elect whose election is contested under the FCEA. Maybe we should look at that on page 5. The significance of certified election results, contests and forms of notice, proof of service, response of contestee, taking the depositions, and reimbursement of fees. All of this is discussed in here. And, of course, challenges in the House other than under the FCEA are in existence as well. They're on the record out there. Procedures to bring a matter before the committee, investigative procedures by the Committee on House Administration when directed by the House to investigate any election, and ordering a recount, things that they can do, and other discussions of things that they've used as remedies in the past. Wow. There's an awful lot here. Let's skip forward to page 5 here and just spend the rest of our segment on this, because why not? It's fun and interesting for a Friday, perhaps. Though there is other news that we probably could get to. I'm just wanting to make you panic a little bit over the weekend here. All right. Page 5, swearing in of member-elect whose election is contested under the FCEA. In other words, if somebody decides that they're going to challenge the election of some or all of the Democrats who purport to have been elected to the 118th Congress, does that mean they can't be sworn in? Not always. Once a notice of the ordinary course of things, once a notice of election contest is filed by a losing candidate with the clerk of the House, and notice is served upon the contestee, the person who is purported to have won, the House of Representatives and the appropriate committee, now the Committee on House Administration, formally obtain jurisdiction over the matter. For the House to be able to finally judge the election of one of its members whose election has been contested under the FCEA, there need not be any further action or motions presented to or adopted by the House on the first day of Congress with regard to the election or concerning the member-elect whose seat is being challenged. With the filing of an election contest, the Committee on House Administration may later hear the matter, recommend a particular action or resolution to the House, and the House may, by simple majority vote, determine finally who has the right to the seat in question, regardless of whether or not the member-elect had been sworn in on the first day of the new Congress. So you can swear everybody in and then just chuck them out later. And it doesn't take a 3/4 majority to expel them or a 2/3 majority to expel them. I guess you can just deem them never having been properly seated in the first place. That's an interesting thing, too. As stated by parliamentarians to the House of Representatives, Brown and Johnson, the seating of a member-elect does not prejudice a contest pending under a Federal Contested Elections Act, under the Federal Contested Elections Act, over final right to the seat. So having taken the oath of office and beginning to serve as a member doesn't prejudice the outcome of a decision like this. If they decide that you were never entitled to the seat in the first place, they don't have to expel you with a 2/3 vote. They can simply pull the plug on you with a majority vote. On occasion, the House has asked certain members-elect to step aside or remain seated when the oath of office is given collectively to other members-elect. If an election contest has been filed and the member-elect whose election is being contested is asked to step aside, then that member-elect may, after the other members-elect have taken the oath of office, merely be administered the oath with no further direction, instruction, or comment by the House. In at least one instance, another member-elect has made a parliamentary inquiry of the Speaker concerning the swearing in of a member-elect whose election has been contested under the statute to clarify that the swearing in of such a member-elect is without prejudice to the House's authority to resolve the election contest and to finally determine who was duly elected. So you might see that done to preserve the rights of the House to make that decision later, but swear somebody in for the sake of having the district represented while the contest was resolved. And that's probably actually only going to happen, though, when there's good faith contesting of the election going on. And you say, well, we shouldn't punish the constituents of the district and leave them unrepresented during this time. But were it murdery Trader Green doing the contesting, I don't know that you would necessarily concede that point. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Guess what has happened in the interim? I think we've pretty well covered, the dangers involved in discussion of election contests. And over the break, I have received notice of contest of my hosting of the show from Joan, who has arrived to make good on the fact that she wasn't able to make the call on Tuesday. At that point, we were repairing things in the house. And I understand you were recently boosted for COVID. I learned that today, too.
Yes.
So, yeah, to that. And that left you a little under the weather yesterday, but fine today. Is that right?
Mostly fine today.
Okay. Just so that we violate HIPAA right off the bat. I figured we'd just do that. I'm not a doctor. It's okay. But, she volunteered on Tuesday, unable to make the ordinary call because of house repair issues, which I don't think there's any federal law preventing me from revealing that story.
No, I think that's fine.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. You know what? I should make up something more glamorous. Like, well, she won the lottery on Tuesday and she was collecting her millions.
Than water seeping into my basement.
But then you'd probably get, I don't know if it's possible for you to be getting more solicitations for donations in email right now. But I guess if you won the lottery, people might be more.
It might amp up just a
tad. Like you could get 11 solicitations per second from some of these races that I'm only seeing 10 at the moment.
For the record, I did buy a Powerball ticket. For the record, I did not win.
No. Well, I contest that outcome.
Once every 5 or so years, I think. Oh, what the hell?
Yeah. It could be your year.
I got one of the numbers.
Well, I think you got them all, and I would say that there's a pretty good possibility that the person who won is a vampire pedophile and should be disqualified. And I don't think those numbers that they declared were the winning numbers are the winning numbers. I think it's a conspiracy. You won, and I think we can probably prove it if you just let us subpoena enough witnesses. Is that okay?
I think you're probably right, and that segues nicely into a story I'm writing right now.
Excellent. Let's do it. I subpoena that
why
record.
We have
that
to
story.
Keep the Senate.
Okay.
Rand Paul as chairman of the Health Committee.
Oh, yeah, that ain't good.
Rand Paul, who says Anthony Fauci funded the research that created the COVID virus in the Wuhan lab.
Oh, boy. I sometimes wonder whether he would continue to say that if he were really in control of things. Not because I think he would find his conscience, but because he would just say, he's gone and he doesn't run things now, so I will.
I think he'll drag him back.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, he raised a lot of money and got a lot of support from yelling at Fauci, so why not continue to do it?
I think he probably would.
Okay.
And, the same Rand Paul who said he had natural immunity against COVID because he was one of the first people to catch it because, of course, he wasn't wearing a mask.
Right. Well, didn't have any natural immunity there at that point.
But once he caught it, he had natural immunity, so he couldn't catch it again, which we found out about that, didn't we?
Yeah. I mean,
that
ain't true either. Okay.
So, we can't let Rand Paul be the chair of the Health Committee. We can't let him be conducting oversight over these agencies. We can't let him be setting the legislative agenda for healthcare. We just can't.
That seems extraordinarily dangerous. And I'm sure there's a lot of equally dangerous situations, but I mean, everybody understands Rand Paul as an outlier, even among Republicans. So sure.
Rand Paul, the self-certified ophthalmologist.
Yes. All right. Not great. And yeah, and he's been having this running battle, and he always thinks he's won and cornered and discredited Fauci, and the rest of the country watches and says, you're insane. Fauci owned you. But not his troops. They circulate the same video and say, here, watch me destroy Anthony Fauci. Okay. Yeah. Particularly bad idea to have him in charge, and no real chance, I don't think, no matter who is running things for the Republican conference in the Senate, that they would just simply deny him that opportunity because it would be too crazy for Republicans. They would just be run out of the town on a rail if they stood in his way.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll happen.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how I'm starting my day. And then I'm going to segue into why we can't let the House take over because of what tweet did I see this morning? It's a CNN story.
Oh, no. Yeah.
And it says, if I can find it.
Okay.
Their plans, if they take the majority, include Hunter Biden press conferences.
A press conference. I mean, they're dangerous, but
probes on the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. And ditching the metal detectors placed outside the chamber after January 6th.
Huge priorities for America.
Yes.
Interesting, though, that, I mean, it just gives you some idea of the lack of ideas they actually have. Of course, one, Hunter Biden, we know they've been threatening that since forever. So I expect that, but I guess I'm actually taken by surprise that of the three major priorities that they have for taking over the agenda for America, one of them out of three, 1/3 of them are personal matters of convenience to members of the House. I really don't want to be delayed entering and leaving the chamber, or for them to find whether or not I have a gun on me. Like, really, I just find that amazing. We'll get Fauci, and we're going to get Hunter Biden. But the other thing is, I want, different kind of orange juice in the House cafeteria, basically.
Yeah. We'll probably get the light bulbs in the styrofoam cups again, too.
That's true. Remember, they did do that. They briefly took over, and they said all of this recycling and compostable containers in the cafeteria, bring back the styrofoam. That was that's owning the libs.
And
that's
the
a long time ago,
light
too.
Bulbs.
Yeah, we got to have those because they're being phased out, and we must stop it. And why not bring back leaded gas while we're at it, too? I mean, I don't know. Come on. Please, more acid rain and killing of bald eagles. That's what America had in its heyday, and we want to bring that back. They are crazy, and they will do anything to own the libs, and
including the debt ceiling.
Yeah, sure,
which is
right.
The third
That's true too.
in my list today of why we can't let the House or the Senate go into Republican hands.
That's on your list. That's not even on their list. They forgot about that. They're more interested in the metal detectors than the debt. Okay. But you're right.
They will threaten it, and this is just the most discouraging thing. Josh Marshall has a post on his ad blog. He talked to some Senate folks, former Senate folks, Adam Gentleson, and I'm reading the post, that when the Senate probably is not going to deal with the debt ceiling in the lame duck session.
Adam
Gentleson and Steve Clements.
Oh, all right.
They agree that there's virtually no chance Democrats are going to do this. Now, it's not official that they're not going to do it, but these guys are pretty well connected, and they probably know. And it's probably because Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema.
So, in other words, they probably won't do it because it would require votes to break the filibuster or get it out of the way.
Right. Well, It would take there is one more opportunity for using a reconciliation.
Oh.
And they could do that. And, they should do that. And there should be enough senators on the Republican side, even if they didn't do that, who say, we don't want to mess with the debt ceiling.
Yeah, I guess
I agree with you and do this. We had the agreement last time around on the debt ceiling where they had the one special carve out just this one time on the filibuster.
Yeah.
They could do that again, and they should do that again.
They should.
Absolutely, House Republicans will do this. But what Gentleson and Clemens see, and this is really scary, is that there are at least a few Democratic senators who think, well, quote, it's bad, but maybe it will be an opportunity for a grand bargain on entitlement reform and managing the federal debt. And Manchin yesterday, I think I saw this in my booster fugue, that Manchin says, we have to deal with this. We have to deal with the debt.
Well, we certainly would have to. Well, we'll have to deal with it one way or the other. But I guess he's saying that would be a fair trade, in my view, curtailing entitlements and attacking the underpinnings of Social Security in exchange for Republican agreement not to wreck the whole rest of the economy. Which somehow we're supposed to believe that the fiscally responsible Republicans, the debt hawks, will risk default. But they say that they will, and they may be too dumb to understand that they shouldn't.
I'm pretty sure that the guys in the House would do it.
The House certainly would, yeah.
The men and women in the Republican conference of the House would do it. They would do it. Rand Paul would do it.
Yeah. And it's difficult to tell. It's a mix of people who just don't believe in economics, I guess, and just think things will continue okay no matter what we do regardless, and others who say, it really could be a disaster, but the Democrats will fold because it could be such a disaster, and they will vote with us to cut Social Security, and then it won't be our fault. And now it occurs to me, maybe that's why Republicans feel so confident in standing there and saying, no, it's a lie to say that Republicans are going to cut Social Security, even though they keep saying that's our plan, and we keep reading the plan out loud. I wonder if there are any of them who say, no, it won't be us that cuts Social Security. I mean, we'll be there too, but we're going to make you do it. And that's how we'll blame you for it. We were there too, but you provided the votes to put us over the top because we held you over a barrel with the world economy.
Pretty much.
I guess that could be it.
And, as with solving the supposed Social Security crisis, solving the debt crisis is easy.
Oh.
Set an astronomically high number for the debt ceiling. Yes, you don't want to get rid of it. You don't want to repeal it, even though it's useless and probably unconstitutional, and we don't need it. Fine, don't repeal it. If it's just that's
not
too
reason enough for you?
far to go for you, just set an astronomically high number that we are not going to reach.
Well, that's
Or
just
or
crazy.
create a mechanism for it that it just automatically resets itself.
All
Or
right, yeah, that too.
or the coin or anything. This one is an easy solve, really,
Yeah. And
logistically, technically.
if you leave it for the next Congress, it will be very interesting, and I wonder whether it would change any minds if the crazy scenarios that I'm getting a little bit worried about with all the election deniers out there, if they simply sort of declare themselves to be the majority, whether they really are or aren't, or they steal a few extra seats just to shore up their majority, even though they would have maybe been able to convince everybody that they won it outright. And if they do things like that, and then I wonder, I guess it doesn't matter what happens after that because there won't be enough Democratic votes to do anything. But I wonder whether at that point anybody's mind changes in terms of all these crazy things like platinum coins or gigantic numbers or hooking up, connecting the debt ceiling to some automatic trigger so that we never have to vote on it again. Those all seemed crazy last week. But since then, crazy secretaries of state have declared losing candidates winners, and we've watched the Congress ratify it despite our objections. So maybe that's not the craziest thing we even do this week. I don't know. But
I do hope, whichever way the election goes, the results of the election make them realize that it has to be dealt with, and they can't let Republicans have their hands on it. We can't even have the threat of it from House Republicans. I mean, it seems really unlikely Democrats are going to be able to keep the House at this point. Although, I'm not convinced that any of the doom and gloom you see from, say, Charlie Cook is real, because I think that they're relying on really crappy polling.
Okay.
But it's also going to be really, really tough to keep the House.
Yes, ordinarily it would be anyway. And although I was somewhat encouraged in the fact that, or just seeing some polling that, I guess for the first time in, I think the answer was in a decade, although I could imagine it would be even longer than that, where a majority of voters said, no, I think the right outcome here would be having a single party in control, the same party in control of the White House and Congress, so that we can actually get some things done, and that splitting control between the parties is actually the poorer option. It's usually not where the electorate is for whatever dumb reason, and it's the same dumb. That's what underlies the usual assumption of the White House's party losing seats in Congress in the midterms comes from. And if that's just not a factor in people's thinking in the way it used to be, or they think the opposite now, could we just buck the historical trend?
We could, couldn't we?
It's possible, yeah, if you really convince people.
Let's hope.
Sure.
I don't know, maybe people got the wrong takeaway in the lesson about checks and balances.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't think, okay, it's got to be the three branches of government that are balancing the power here and checking each other, and thought, well, okay, it's got to be the opposition party that's doing it.
No, that's true.
It's not an unreasonable thought until you see what the Republican Party has turned into.
Yeah, and I guess it could also be, well, ordinarily I would want a robust opposition party in Congress checking the White House in its abuse, possibility that they might abuse power, but considering, or at least to present different viewpoints on policy. But I guess given that they've said that's not what we're going to do, what we're going to do with it is
policy.
Yeah, we're going to investigate the president's son again 100 times over and beat up Anthony Fauci on top of it. Maybe it's not so important that they check the White House after all. It's not important enough to them to say that they will. So it can't be important to me either, because all they say is they're going to, harass Hunter Biden. And that's not really
They're
the
going
check
to
I was
harass
looking
Hunter
for.
Biden. They're going to have a debt crisis.
Yeah.
And they are going to make the Trump tax cuts for the wealthy permanent. That's their policy. That is the entirety of the policy agenda from Republicans in the House. Well,
not much to vote for.
Fauci.
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah, and I'm sure that they'll come up with some other things too. Like there was a guy gave me a parking ticket. We're going to make that wrong under federal law.
There's not going to be any policy. I mean, we saw it with the commitment to America.
Yeah, I mean, every time they make a list, what do you guys want to do? I mean, it was a 3-item list, and one of them was get that thing out of the way of the door.
Yeah.
That's not federal policy.
These are not serious people.
Yeah, I mean, wow, that's so okay. And I mean, I don't know. I don't want to go anywhere where there's not a metal detector and there is Lauren Boebert.
A Republican member of Congress.
Yeah, or pick any name out of a hat, but certainly those guys who are like, who've made a career of saying, yeah, I will recklessly carry weapons wherever. I'll even stack them up behind me while I'm on Zoom just so you see how many I've got. No thanks. Not to mention, still questions about, murdery Trader Green and whether or not she believes that most of Congress are aliens or vampires or whatever. And not
Alien
really positive.
Vampires.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's space lasers. Why not? Space people, too. So extraordinarily dangerous.
Extraordinarily dangerous. And real motivation to get out there and get out the vote, which you can do in any number of ways. And you can find those out by going to dailykos.com/getoutthevote.
Okay. That's the place
or
to be.
Or GOTV, I believe, is the official.
That's what the cool kids call it.
dailykos.com/GOTV.
Yeah, that's what we shared last week.
There are all sorts of things that you can do. You can phone bank, you can text. You don't have to leave your house. You can be an election protector. We still are signing up people to be poll observers and to get trained to be able to know who to call when you need to call when there's a problem at the polls.
Yeah.
Lots of things you can do. You can work in Wisconsin, Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Arizona, Michigan.
Okay. If you're in those states or nearby.
Lots and lots of opportunities to get involved. And it seems silly to put in a plug for more money because all of the candidates are doing that and it's really annoying at this point.
Yeah, well.
But you can still give, and that money will be used for Get Out the Vote. At this point, anything that you give will make sure that they have the ability to get their volunteers out, to feed them, to drive them, to have the gas, to have the snacks, to just...
There's still things that get done in the last moments. It was always sort of conventional wisdom that a contribution this late was somehow less than useful. But when you're paying for a television advertising campaign, yes. But when you're paying for gas for cars and pizza for volunteers and pencils
phone
for
bank space, all of that stuff.
Right.
All of that stuff.
Phones
so the money
for people
can still help.
To monitor elections.
It's the kind of dollars that really do help.
Yeah. So no reason to withhold at this point if you find that there's still more that you can give. Certainly never a problem with giving your time, and plenty of people who can utilize it with you on the street or at home, whichever is your preference and whatever you're able to do. So, okay.
Even have a texting option so that you don't actually have to talk to anybody.
I know it can be uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Sit at home and you can just on your phone just say stuff and not have to talk to anybody in person.
Right. Well, you
which,
can just imagine
frankly, is my kind of get out the vote.
Yeah.
Like the phone.
That seems easy to do, and you can worry about, now I'm the person on the other end of those annoying texts. Yes, but they go away. And they don't
go away, and a get out the vote text is a lot less offensive than a money text.
Yes, that's true. And sometimes that's all it is, we see that you didn't vote yet. Are you planning to? Or do you have a plan to vote? Or do you have someone you want to bring with you? Or just remember, you're supposed to have done this by now, and you're running out of time to do it.
Here's your polling place. Just anything to make it easier for people to remember they need to vote and to actually get it done.
Yes, and you can attest to the occasional difficulty of remembering to do things just because they're happening on a Tuesday. Sometimes, it happens to all of us when there's particularly, and when it happens, when there's a holiday on Monday, which,
yes.
But that's probably why they should make Election Day a holiday. No one forgets the holiday. You forget what happens the next day. But I mean, look, Tuesday's a rough day for anybody, and it's the next worst to a Monday.
Weird one. Why? Why did they pick the first Tuesday after the first Monday?
I read something at one point about it, and I think it had to do with the fact, I mean, it's stupid, but I think it had to do with the fact originally, like back in the day when the vast majority of the population was rural and they went to town where the ballot boxes were for market day.
And
then
so it was market day.
Yeah, or it was like the day after market day. You're in town, you've sold your goods. Before you go back, come vote.
That makes sense.
Maybe.
Maybe
a total lie, too.
Could be they just, Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not like weekends were really a thing.
Right. So it may have just been like the market day thing. Can't be Sunday because you got to be in church that day. And it's not Monday either for reasons. Maybe that was market day, the Monday, and you haul yourself to town on Saturday, go to church, set up the market on Monday. Day after is Tuesday, vote before you go home. And there were all sorts of other motivations back then, too. Like they'd crack open a big barrel of whiskey for you to vote with back in those days. So, it's this, I think they have that other special rule. So if if Tuesday is the first day of November, like they won't vote on November 1st. It has
to be the first Tuesday after the first Monday.
Yeah, like you can't just spring it on people. Oh, I forgot it was November. I'll miss my chance to vote.
Like, my best friend, her birthday is on the 1st of February, and I can never remember because it's the 1st, because it's,
I'm still writing the 31st on my checks. Yes. Why don't we do that month to month? I don't know. Maybe we do. But no one writes checks anymore, and that could have something to do with it. But it's a very odd thing, and certainly something that people have said we should be changing. Early voting changes a lot now because it's on for so long. I find that at least some point during the month that they're holding it, I just accidentally drive by the polling place at some point and say, oh, yeah.
Get this done now.
Right.
Because you're a good citizen.
Right. And less lines, and that's great. I understand.
And your local Democratic Party stops calling you to tell you to get out the vote when you vote. That's
actually a great benefit.
When they have your vote done, when they have your vote registered, they say, okay, we can cross him off and we don't have to spend time on him. So, yes.
That's right.
Early vote along with everything else. If you can vote now and you want to get it out of the way if you're doing actual GOTV because you're going to be busy doing GOTV.
Right. So that's a great thing. And people who have signed up to volunteer, they remind them just for that purpose. Vote early so that you don't have to worry about it on Tuesday and you can work all day. But it's a great incentive. They won't knock on your door and call you if they have the records early enough that say, yeah, this person's already voted. We don't have to bother them. I can spend my time bothering someone else. And, your pizza dollars go further.
You're helping yourself. You're helping the GOTV volunteers.
Yeah. It's a solid reason to get it done. If there's no lines, so much the better. I did see that apparently the Republican theory now circulating among the weirdos is not only will we not vote early because somehow that's voter fraud. But we now they have plans to line up in the last hour or so of in-person voting on Election Day so that there are massive lines in case any Democrats who show up, they'll turn around and go home because they won't want to wait in that line. And I guess they've given no thought to the possibility that Republicans will show up and say, I don't know. They don't see color, they say, so maybe they don't see lines either. I don't know. You never know with these guys. But I guess because it's their plan, it's going to work. They're very confident people, Republicans. All right.
Thank you for sharing that one with me. I hadn't heard it.
Yeah, that's a weird and fun one. And by the way, if you run into that, you know the rule by now. That's right. If you get in line before the polls close, no matter how many stupid Republicans also want to ruin their day in front of you, you are allowed to vote if you are in that line or in New Jersey on that line. In time for the polls before it closes, they have to let you do it. Now, somebody might come out and say no, but that's when you have to pick up the phone and call the election protection folks and say it's 6:59 if you're in Virginia and they close at 7, or 7:59 and you close at 8 o'clock state. All right, you get to say, I get to vote. That's my right. So do remember that. And thank you for coming by today. It was nice to hear from you on a Friday, and I'm glad all is well for you.
So far, so good. So far, the basement's relatively dry, so...
That's all you need to know.
I'll let you know on Tuesday if it worked.
Yeah, okay. And, depending on how your day is going on Tuesday, if you can spare a moment, we'd love to hear from you, or even just a point or two.
You know how it is when you're doing elections. Election day is the most boring day of all.
Until about 8 o'clock.
Until 8 o'clock.
Right. Well, if you have the time, we'd love to hear from you, and look forward to hearing what's going on, and then even better, look forward to good results afterwards. Thanks, Joe.
All right. You're welcome.
Take care.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
That's right. Now it's time for you to listen to Justice Putnam with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, ending your, organically produced Netroots Radio weekend right about now. And then, of course, all the fantastic syndicated programs that fill out the rest of the day. Do stay tuned for his take on these stories and more. We'll see you next week.